Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, January 15th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about where the Republican Party can win back seats in order to win the United States Senate, control of it becoming the majority party as they've been for the past 6 years. And this also serves as a video to showcase where the Democratic Party needs to focus a lot of their attention in terms of re-electing or possibly electing new Democrats, because this Senate map isn't something that is super favorable to either political party. It's about even, depending on the year, whether it's a Democratic hold or a Republican wave year. That'll really determine how this map is viewed. But until we get a general idea of how 2022 is going to go, we can conclude initially that the Republican Party will have the advantage just based off what history tells us. So the Republican Party currently does not have control of the United States Senate. We're actually going to characterize all of the seats that the Democratic Party currently holds, and this actually brings them to just 50 seats. Now, if you're not entirely sure why the Democrats have the majority through 50 seats, many people are confused, and I understand why, but essentially when there's a 50-50 tie in the United States Senate, the vice president would break the tie and give the majority to their political party. So, of course, with a vice president, Kamala Harris, the Democrats would in fact take the majority, even with a 50-50 tie in the United States Senate. There has to be a majority at some point, so the Democrats look as if they are going to take that majority away from the GOP, despite the GOP having it for the past 6 years. So, looking at this Senate map, if we applied the 2020 election results, it would actually be much worse for the Republican Party. They have two Republicans in Biden states, Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey and Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, and the Democrats have 0 senators in states that were won by Donald Trump in the presidential election. So that's something that they have going for them. Back in 2018, it was very difficult for a number of Democrats to either win re-election or try to become competitive in a number of states because Donald Trump had won them by very large amounts. Tennessee was decided by just around 11 percentage points, despite Donald Trump winning it by nearly 30. Actually, it may have been 30, but very large margin is what you should take away from that. The Democrats narrowed it down significantly, but not enough that they actually were able to win the seat, and it was still a double-digit victory for the GOP. So, a number of states, aren't exactly as partisan as Tennessee on the Democratic side, but they still are Biden states. And if the Biden coalition and the Democratic coalition can hold on to those voters, well, it's not going to be a super easy ride for the GOP back to the majority. But since it is a 50-50 tie, all the Republicans would need is 1 seat. Effectively, they would just be able to win it through any of the contested seats. And right now, we actually should characterize the races that I think will be contested straight off the bat. We're talking about Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, Georgia special because Georgia regular with Senator-elect Jon Ossoff, he will be serving through 2026. So that one isn't even going to be up until 6 years from now. Jon Ossoff's going to be a long time in the United States Senate. In New Hampshire, that one goes under the contested category because Governor Chris Sununu, very popular Republican, could potentially run in 2022. And it's also more accustomed to electing Republicans to the Senate than a number of other Democratic states with Republican governors, such as Vermont or Maryland. Arizona and Nevada will also be states that are in contention. Now, Ohio and Iowa are states that could be targeted. Alaska could be, but I would say the GOP is the clear favorite for right now. And since we are talking about a video where the Republicans can win back the Senate, for right now, I'm not going to cover that one. And for, under that category as well, I'm not really going to talk about Florida. So as you can see, based off the 7 states, that will probably be decided by lean or tilt margins. I think Florida could be out of there, especially with Marco Rubio as the nominee, or even Ivanka Trump, depending on whether or not she decides to run. But that leaves 7 contested Senate races, and that actually brings up races in 4 Biden states: Nevada, New Hampshire, Arizona, and Georgia. But the remaining 3 are Trump states. So I don't think the Republican Party would have too much difficulty winning in states that they previously won. If we were talking about a scenario in which they won back control of the United States Senate, you see it gets a little bit trickier for Senate Republicans because they only narrowly won in Pennsylvania previously. That was a 1.5% margin of victory for the Republican Party. And yes, that's larger than Donald Trump's victory, but if we're talking about the swing from 2016 to 2020, it wasn't super significant that it likely would have drastically changed the Senate results and if we are applying the same map. But that's something the Republicans should worry about because Pat Toomey will no longer be the incumbent. He will no longer be the incumbent Republican running. So it'll be an open seat, and there is a very popular Lieutenant Governor Fetterman who is planning on running, or at least I don't know if he's officially announced. I know he started raising money, but people do that when they form exploratory campaigns. Pat Toomey will not be on the ballot. He's been very firm in his opposition to President Trump, and I think that's something that could bring down some of the more traditional Republicans. If these voters in the state want to nominate someone Trump-like, well, that could actually in turn hurt the GOP, given the very negative connotation with President Trump's name that has really plagued the nation, quite literally, in a sense. But looking at Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey's not going to be running there, so if the GOP was to win the majority, they would have to win in Pennsylvania. Now, Wisconsin and North Carolina are a little bit more realistic. I mean, I would bet on the Republicans winning in North Carolina. Wisconsin's a true toss-up, but for right now, for the sake of this argument, we're going to characterize all three of them for the GOP, but they're by no means safeties. These are not safe states. They're not going to be 100% for the GOP. The GOP is still going to have to fight for these states, despite them being in the majority right now in these, not in the majority, but holding these states. It's kind of weird referring to the Democrats as the majority in terms of the United States Senate, but that puts the Republicans at 50, and that still doesn't put them over the top because Vice President Kamala Harris will be there past 2022. But looking at the surrounding states, I would say the Republican Party's next bet would likely be the state of Georgia. Now, Raphael Warnock defeated Kelly Loeffler in this previous election because she was someone who was not strong for the GOP. She was a transplant, and the voters recognized that. The voters recognized Kelly Loeffler in many ways, was doing a lot of what she did to pander to a lot of these voters. And not to say politicians don't pander, but it was very clear. It was very clear what Kelly Loeffler was trying to do in this state. And, she was someone who was appointed. She had never been elected by Georgian citizens before. So it was something that really didn't strike too many voters to heart when she came in, using a number of things that, or trying to really just appeal to these Georgia voters in a way that seemed disingenuous. And I saw that as someone who viewed her campaign. I viewed it under the campaigns of David Perdue, Jon Ossoff, Raphael Warnock, Kelly Loeffler, and she was the one who stuck out because you could tell she was the real one who wasn't from Georgia, who was the one who, was doing this because she wanted to just solely win a re-election bid. And, even though David Perdue may not have necessarily won the whole character argument against Jon Ossoff definitely did a much better campaign at bringing it back to a more character-driven campaign. I think Kelly Loeffler was just someone who, by comparison to David Perdue, was very different, and someone who, if David Perdue was to win, I still wouldn't have seen a Kelly Loeffler victory. And she, underperformed David Perdue significantly, just not enough that the Democrats lost the regular election. Jon Ossoff won by 1.2%. Kelly Loeffler lost by around 2 points. So that was a difference of around 1 percentage point. Not super significant, but keep in mind Donald Trump won this state by Joe Biden won this state by 0.26%, I believe. So it was very narrow in Georgia in this election. So really any difference could have ultimately helped the Republican Party. But since they had two candidates who didn't do too well, I wouldn't exactly say that this is a super solid Republican state, but I do think that if the Republicans are able to run someone who isn't Kelly Loeffler and is a more traditional, more Romney, McCain-esque type Republican, it's possible. It's very possible that the Republican Party is able to win this Senate race. But also, Stacey Abrams is likely going to be running in the 2022 governor ballot. That should help Democrats down ballot in this state, but also we have yet to see what actually happens in terms of who announces their bid. But Raphael Warnock, I think, would be target number one for the GOP, since it's a name so recognizable, so recent for the GOP that, many of them have forgotten about Mark Kelley, who's up in 2022. Many of them have forgotten about the potential competitive nature of New Hampshire or Nevada and focused a lot of their energy on Georgia. And I think a lot of that could carry into 2022 and could be a real moneymaker for the GOP. But, if the Republican Party was not to go through there or to add on to a new majority for the GOP, I would say Georgia would be the first one to go, and then the Republicans could expand it. And I think they could do so through the state of Arizona. Now, Arizona isn't exactly a Democratic state. Nevada is a historically Democratic state. The reason why the Democrats did worse in this election is because they underperformed with Latino voters. Moreover, that Joe Biden underperformed and Donald Trump outperformed his previous numbers amongst Latino/Hispanic voters, which ultimately I would say was solely based off Donald Trump's campaign, solely based off Donald Trump's ability to sway a number of voters, because I would say the Democratic Party definitely cried wolf back in 2016 when they argued to a lot of minority voters that if Donald Trump was elected, it would be the end-all be-all, that this would be, something super horrible for minority voters. And, the Democratic Party still made that argument. They still argued that, But the question is how well that actually resonated with a lot of these voters. And as we saw on Election Day, it didn't resonate nearly as well as it did back in 2016 when we saw Miami-Dade County decided by just single digits between Joe Biden and Donald Trump when Hillary Clinton won it by 30 points back in 2016. There was a very big swing in terms of support from Latino voters away from Joe Biden compared to Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton was a losing candidate. Imagine if Biden was able to tap into her voter base amongst minorities and more. Texas wouldn't be a likely Republican state. It would still be a Republican state, but it would still, be closer. Florida probably would have gone to the Democratic Party. Nevada would have shifted to the left. Arizona wouldn't have been, called 4 days after the election. So looking at the swing in terms of these voters, I expect many of these minority voters to return back to the Democratic Party following the 2020 election. It's not that Donald Trump made these minority voters lifelong Republicans, more that he was just able to win them in one election, and they're likely to return back to the Democratic Party. In Georgia, in the runoff elections, well, they did exactly that. Only white voters went back to the Republican Party. So looking at, yes, I do think the GOP could win in Nevada and New Hampshire given the right circumstances, but I would say their easiest pathway to being elected would be through Georgia, just through a low turnout type of election, through a Republican energy type wave year. Same thing in Arizona. But I think New Hampshire and Nevada are going to be a little bit more trickier than that. And if I was to say, here's how the Republican Party would win back the majority, I would say those 3 states, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, retain them, and then win Georgia. And then if there's room for more, win Arizona, then Nevada, and then New Hampshire. But outside of that, I can't imagine the Republican majority expanding to further than 54 seats. Colorado probably won't be competitive, and none of the others are going to be competitive. So looking at this map, I would say both parties fare pretty well. Both worst-case scenarios for the GOP and the Democratic Party don't exactly end up as bad as you might think. But I would say also the Republican Party doesn't have the easiest pathway to winning the Senate majority, but if they have a red wave year, they could very well do it. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.